Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructed Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructedCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 141 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, and I'm joined by our co-host, Brad.
Hello, everybody.
Before we get too far into this episode, I just want to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructed Criticism Network are sponsored by PureMTGO.com. If you'd like to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Common Knowledge YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. With that out of the way, let's get on the podcast for the week.
Woohoo! How have you been, sir? It's been a while, it feels like.
Yeah, man, I've been doing great. I think it has been a while. I think we're getting towards 2 weeks since the last time we spoke, and like face-to-face. Yeah,
I think so. And then we had some issues with the hosting site. I think actually all of the podcasts under constructed criticism was having issues getting uploaded, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think Apple Music and Spotify and everything like that were like the hosting site that we use for whatever reason was having some trouble. Not quite sure how it works, but
yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors behind the curtains. I have no idea.
Right, we've just basically been playing some Magic.
I did have a question for you though.
Oh yeah, go on.
How was the Fitz's grape soda?
It was phenomenal. Easily the best grape soda I've ever had.
Okay,
easily. Good. It wasn't even close.
It was.
Yeah. Now, I am going to get like a P.O. box set up now that I said this out loud. So if our viewers ever want to send me their local or regional grape soda, they can send it to my P.O. box. So be on the lookout for that next episode or on my Twitter.
I know I'm not like a big craft beer sort of guy. You know, I'm not a big beer influencer or beer follower or whatever you want to call them. But you give me a good craft soda and I am all over it.
It's funny that you said that about the like craft beer thing. Because, like, I was recently, like, given the opportunity to drink one that, like, was advertised as, like, watermelon flavor. And, like, look, dude, anything fruity, like, that actually sounds like it tastes good, I'm all over, okay?
Sure.
I took, like, one sip, I was like, what? This tastes nothing like watermelon.
Yeah. I work with a guy that's, I think he's actually reached the level of beer influencer on, like, Instagram or whatever, wherever he does his social media. Like, he ships local beers out all over the country, kind of like I did with you with the soda, but he's like that with beer, and people send him beers, and he gets like free tours at breweries because he's going to post about it and all this other stuff. And he was the same way. You know, I told him I like blueberry drinks because I love blueberry. So he gave me this blueberry beer, and it was like the flavor was a little tart, but the consistency was like old smoothie. And I just wasn't having it, you know, like there's a certain point where it's just not beer anymore, I guess.
I'm 100% with you there. Like I said, craft soda, I'm all over it. It doesn't have to be grape flavored. I prefer grape flavored, but any flavor
root beer,
will do.
Grape, anything. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I once spent $7 on a bottle of root beer, and it was the best root beer I ever had in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this is like a regional thing or a national thing, so I'm just going to ask about it. Jones soda?
Jones, I think we have it at some stores here, but it's definitely not prevalent.
Gotcha. I don't know. It's in all of the Krogers around here. They have like I actually just pulled up their website to look at it. They have like a bunch of different flavors. My personal favorite is like their green apple. And like, I don't know, maybe I'll have to send you back some green apple if you can't find any near you.
Yeah, I know that I've seen Jones, but like if someone were to ask me to go buy some right now, I would have to look it up. Like, I don't know what stores sell it, but I know that I've seen it around here before. But yeah, we got the Fitz's bottling company. They have like 2 locations that they bottle their sodas and stuff at, and it's also a restaurant. There's one like right across the street from my office. It's fantastic. You can sit in there and eat your lunch and watch them bottle the sodas and make the sodas and all that cool stuff. It's like a brewery, you know, but for soda.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so is there anything going on for you in the MTG world?
MTG world, not a whole lot. Not a lot of MTGO, I should say. It's been the Halloween season, and this is typically my time of year to like hang out, be creative, watch horror movies, try to get back into writing a little bit, just explore some of the darker corners of things, I guess. So I spent a lot of time brewing decks lately in the Discord, on paper, on my phone, online, whatever, PDH, 60 card, constructed pauper decks, just sort of exploring what the options are. So not a whole lot of actual playing, but a lot of theorizing, I guess is the correct term.
Heck yeah, you got any cool decks up there in the brain?
I do. They're in my phone. It's hard for me to remember them all because I tend to use a lot of the same cards throughout decks. So that leads to me getting decks mixed up in my head if I don't keep them down on paper or private on MTG Goldfish or whatever. I think I tried to brew a Tron Dragon's Treasure deck that I would actually like to play sometime. Is probably terrible, but it's just making treasure tokens and ramping out dragons.
Yeah, you lost me at Tron, but you got me back at Dragons and Treasure.
Yeah, it's the only way I could think of getting these without true, just, ramp cascade. It's the only way I could think of getting big dragons out. Because there's that shrieking lightning mare hawk dragon thing. But it's like a 5/5 flying lightning shrieker. That's what it's called. Looks like from Jumpstart and also from Fate Reforged. It's at common. It's 4 generic and a red for a 5/5 dragon, flying, trample, and haste. At the beginning of the end step, Lightning Shrieker's owner shuffles it into their library. It's not bad for a 5/5 wallop.
Yeah, I wonder if we could find a way to blink this, on your end step it triggers, then we blink it, so you don't got to put it back into your library.
I was wondering about that because I've brewed other decks where you can blink creatures that would die at the end of the your end step or whatever. I assume it works the same way with putting it in your library sort of thing.
I've been playing some blue-white fairies in Pauper, and then I've probably played 2 or 3 leagues of that. And then I played a lot of Burn and a lot of Modern, and Burn in Pauper and Modern, I guess, is I've been basically just alternating, play a league of Modern, and then play a few matches of Burn and Pauper, and, maybe play a league in Pauper, then back to a league in Modern or whatever. Been playing just tons with the Burn decks. It's interesting. The reason that I got into playing Burn is because I really had thought about methods to improving and stuff like that. And, I started typing down tons of notes on improving and stuff like that. Basically an entire rant on improving in Magic and how to track that. One of the things that I realized in that was in my skill assessment, something that I really do not always have the best skill for, particularly, I can do it if I focus really hard on it, but it doesn't come naturally to me, is planning to all the possible scenarios in which I win the game. And so one of the reasons that I decided to pick up Burn is because I had a really strong feeling that the Burn decks would be perfect for that, right? Where the difficult games as a Burn player, right? You need to know exactly to what card draws am I playing to try and win this game, et cetera, et cetera. And I've learned a lot, and it's really helped me own that skill because I was right. The decks are very much involved and centered around that as far as play patterns and stuff like that. Okay. And there's a really high level of decision making in both decks, I think. So it's been tons of fun to play it across both formats, especially because, like I said, the play patterns are very similar, but they're just different enough to where it doesn't get stale if you alternate which format you're playing it in. Yeah,
they're just different enough that makes it fun and interesting, I think.
Yeah, so been doing that to varying degrees of success, but I'm very excited to get into our main topic, which is actually about that blue-white fairies deck I've been playing.
Yeah, that sounded very intriguing, and I know we got a cool email from a listener, I think it was a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. We almost talked about it when we recorded last time, but we decided to we almost touched on it, I should say. We almost put it in the Q&A or whatever. So we decided to make an entire episode about it.
Yeah, so we got an email a while back from a viewer named Sam. Basically said, "Hey fellas, I've been listening to your podcasts lately. Thank you for all the hard work you guys put into analyzing the format. I'm seeking help on a blue-white fairy tempo strategy. It's similar to mono blue tempo, except it splashes white fairy godmother, Secret of the Way, and Journey to Nowhere. He was initially interested in the deck because of the neat loop between Fairy Godmother and Ninja of the Deep Hours, and later he realized that Godmother also goes well with Seeker of the Way. The deck functions like Mono Blue Delver, except the main threat isn't Delver, it's Seeker. He's tried both Delver and Seeker, but Delver feels so inconsistent, especially in 2 colors. He's also tried Skyfisher to bounce fairies, but that strategy felt too slow. Then he goes on to say that he's sure that we've thought about the interactions he's describing above, and so he shipped a list. And then, we sort of emailed back and forth because this was right before I had to take some time away from the show and stuff like that. But eventually, he sent me the most updated list, and this is the one that we've been playing. Just to run through it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's 21 lands. He's playing 3 Ash Barrens, 1 Evolving Wilds, 8 islands, 5 plains, and 4 Tranquil Coves. And then for his enchantments, he has 2 Journey to Nowhere. And then, I guess, going along with that removal suite, he's also playing 2 Snap. And then for the instance, he has 4 Counterspell, 4 Mutagenic Growth. And then he has 8 Cantrips and Ponder Preordain. And then he has the 19 creatures that are 3 Fairy Guide Mother. For those of you that don't know what that card does, it's a 1/1 with flying for 1, but it's also an adventure card, and the adventure half of it is a sorcery for white 1. Target creature gets +2/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. And then the 3 Fairy Seer, 4 Ninja of the Deep Hours, 2 Palace Sentinels, 3 Seeker of the Way, and 4 Spellstutter Sprite. And then there's a sideboard. I tweaked the sideboard a lot every time I ran a league with it. So the exact sideboard that you play with, I don't think we should necessarily talk too much about. Although I did have thoughts on what the ideal sideboard is right now for this current metagame.
Sure, for the online metagame.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's often, usually when I post a paper deck I've built or a MTG Goldfish deck I've put together, I hardly ever post the sideboard just because they change so dramatically sometimes.
One thing about this that was a lot of fun for me personally is that a lot of times whenever I play Magic, I just straight net deck the list. I oftentimes don't even change a singular sideboard card. I basically just take the list, may or may not come up with sideboard strategies before I play, and then I just play the list and I take notes while I play. So this was a lot of fun for me to get to flex muscles and go, what seems off about this before I even played it, and then play it to determine whether or not I was correct, and then kind of reevaluate after each league. It was a muscle that I think all Magic players should learn, which is how to recognize things in the metagames or in decks that other players can't. But it's just never been something that I've really prioritized because I've basically just been trying to improve my in-game play for as long as I've been playing Magic.
Yep. Yeah, that's sort of just grip it and rip it sort of strategy. Yeah, I do that a lot whenever I just sort of copy and paste a deck into online. And like you said, you'll kind of go through it at first and say, I'm not too sure about this card, or what if I did 4 of this one and 3 of this one? But that comes in later iterations after a league or 2 or whatever.
I don't know. I had before playing it, some initial thoughts. I didn't know if you did as well. Some things that maybe stood out to you that didn't seem quite correct or anything like that.
Just based off the list that we had been given, and this may just be personal, my personal bias towards brewing decks. I don't typically build tempo-oriented decks, even when I start out to build a tempo deck and label it as such. I still end up with 32 creatures and, it just ends up being an aggro deck. So the first thing I noticed off the top, not just because it's at the top of the list, but 21 lands seems a little heavy to me. That may be my personal, like I said, my personal bias. A lot of tempo decks you see can get by with 19 or 20. Granted, those are Izzet colors or blue-red colors, so they're a little faster. But that was one of the first things I noticed about it. And then, let's just start there. Let's start in that little land suite, that land package. What did you think about the initial 21 there?
Yeah, so initially, I was pretty much in agreement with you. I wanted to trim a land, probably. I also, it's really hard to tell because my final list looked a fair bit different than this. But also, the Islands Plains split, the 1 Evolving Wilds, I think, is much worse than the 4th Ash Barrens. Basically, the thing is, is you very rarely ever play, at least in my experience playing this deck, you very rarely ever play your Ash Barrens naturally. But the time that you want to, that you don't get to, oh boy. So with this first list that I played, some really good examples, are, let's say that you have the opening hand, you're playing against like Affinity or something like that. You have 2 Dust to Dust, you have like a Tranquil Cove and double Ash Barrens. Mm-hmm. So you're probably going to play your Tranquil Cove. Turn 2, you're probably going to cycle for your planes, assuming that you don't draw a land or anything. Right. And then depending on what your opponent is developing, you might actually want to play your Ash Barrens to just go ahead and play your Dust to Dust, depending on what you've drawn and stuff like that. And so imagine that like Evolving Wilds is somewhere in there, or worse, like you draw your Evolving Wilds as your 3rd land, thinking like, yes, I got my land, I get to Dust to Dust, and you look and it's your tapped land. The reason that I don't really consider Tranquil Cove whenever I think of stuff like that is the plus side to Tranquil Cove coming in tapped is the fact that it produces either color of mana, right?
Right, your turn 2 is still pretty wide open.
Exactly. While it's true that you could top deck Tranquil Cove at a time that you needed an untapped land, it at least has other plus sides. So that was like the main thing that I cut before I even played the list, was I changed the Evolving Wilds to the 4th Ash Barrens.
Sure.
A part of me felt bad for doing that, just because I probably should have tested to see if there was stuff that I was missing about Evolving Wilds. So if you're a viewer that has an argument for why the 1st Evolving Wilds is better than the 4th Ash Barrens, please tell me. I'm always open to being wrong.
You know, and another thing too, I don't want to take up the whole episode talking about the original land base, but when you look at the rest of the deck, not including the sideboard, but the main deck here, if you take out the Palace Sentinels and you consider that you're only really ever going to cast the Ninja for 2 mana, this deck really tops out at about 2 mana. And that's, you know, for comparison, that's right about where, say, Mono White Heroic tops out, and they often play 17 to 18 lands and do just fine.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things about having 21 lands, right, is this idea that you want to double and triple spell as much as possible. Right. That's sort of, I think, the logic behind having more lands. So that was actually another thing that I noticed, though, in looking at the deck, was if I could somehow get the average mana cost of this deck down a little bit more, I could also, you know, that would be another justification for cutting some of these lands just to keep the deck going, right?
Sure.
Because, you know, if I could play 1 less land, but still build the deck in a way that allows me to double and triple spell a lot, I would be very happy. And then, you know, sticking to the spirit of the email, another thing that I noticed, moving on to the creature base, I guess, is that in the email, Sam detailed that he wanted this to play like a tempo deck, sort of similar to Mono Blue Tempo, but he wanted Seeker of the Way to be the main threat. So I tried to stick...
I am all aboard that train.
I am as well, and I wanted to stick to that, but the main thing that stuck out to me as odd is reading that, but then seeing 3 Seeker of the Way as, like, in the deck list.
Instead of 4?
Exactly. So, it's very rare, I don't think I've ever actually seen a Mono Blue Delver deck, for example, that played 3 Delver. Like, normally they're playing the full 4, or they're not playing them, right?
Sure, that makes sense.
And so, whenever you detail, right, like, I want this to be built around Seeker of the Way, certainly there are decks that aren't entirely built around their win condition, but Seeker of the Way is efficient enough that I think there isn't very many good justifications for not having the 4th if you want that to be the main game plan of your deck.
Right. Yep, and I have definitely played meta decks with Seeker of the Way and brewed plenty of decks with Seeker of the Way, and it's just one of those cards where it either needs to steal the show and be a full play set, or you want like 1 or 2 as sort of not even as a threat, as more of like a stabilizer, if you will. You know, if you're going to make it the star of your show, it needs to be the star of the show. You really need to go in all in on it.
I pretty much agree with what you're saying. I think there's a little bit more nuance to it, particularly if it's ever coming out of the sideboard or anything like that. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like I said, you know, my brews end up slanting towards the aggressive archetype anyway. But yeah, that's just some of my experiences with it. Did you ever find it awkward having just Seeker of the Way on the board and wanting to drop your Ninja in? Like, you prowessed up your Seeker and you're like, man, I would really love to ninjutsu this Ninja in here, but then I'd have to bring back my giant life-linking, you know, Seeker of the Way.
This actually, I think, kind of gets into... in theory, another issue that I had with the deck in general, and I don't mean to go all over the place, but that was some of the things going on I don't think took full advantage of Seeker of the Way, meaning that there was a lot of the times that like I wanted to hold back mana, right? Or if I'm attacking with Seeker of the Way, that means that like I'm probably not journeying to nowhere, or if I do, then I don't want a ninja. Like there's a lot of these like slight anti-synergies. But there is also something to be said, and I've played a bunch of decks like this, where there are a few anti-synergies, but the synergy that you have going on and the power level of the cards outweighs those by a fair margin. Yes, there were times that I wanted to maybe ninja back a Seeker of the Way, and like didn't know whether or not it was good. That being said, how I always justified it to myself was I have if I do ninja this back, I have 2 threats that are pretty much must answers. They must gum up the board.
Yeah.
To deal with these, right? So usually it's worth getting the ninja hit in, because 1, it's going to draw you a card, which is going to be more stuff to pump your Seeker. 2, like a lot of Pauper is about just actual how many cards do you get to play in a game. And that's going to up that count. It's going to let you like replay your Seeker at maybe a more advantageous time of the game. So like if you know your opponent is coming in with a Wrath, right? Like then you get to make the decision like is ninja or if you get the read that they're coming in with a Wrath, I guess. Right. Like you get to make more decisions. So yes, but I don't think it was too big of a problem.
I could just see how that would be a feel bad, but I don't think it'd be something that you'd run into every single game or every single match or whatever.
The only other real issue that I had, I guess, sort of goes back to the wanting to play as many spells in a singular turn as possible. And, like, you don't always want to do this. I more mean, like, having the availability of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to not really like the Journey to Nowheres. At least
that was going to be my next topic. Yep.
Yeah. At least
great sideboard card.
Yeah. And you know, I could even see it having a home in the main deck. It's just I really like Snap in this sort of list, and the reason why, right, is because I think if you're trying to get your Seeker through, snap your opponent's creature, attack for 3. You have your 2 lands untapped, so then you can counter it on the next turn. I think is very, very powerful.
Yeah, Snap, if you're going for a true tempo sort of deck, I think Snap is considerably better than Journey to Nowhere.
So that was sort of my stuff before the games that like I thought about. I was happy to be wrong about some of it and correct about some of it. Did you have anything else like just going into games or anything that you really thought about?
Not too much. I was kind of leery on the 4 straight up counter spells. I know there's plenty to work around here. We got plenty of creatures. You know, it's not like we're running a blitz deck where we're all in on Seeker of the Way, but sometimes that counterspell just sort of feels weird when you got Seeker of the Way out, because you obviously 99% of the, well, not 99, but a good majority of the time you're playing counterspell on your opponent's turn, and that's not necessarily when you want to prowess up your Seeker of the Way, at least in my play style, I guess. But that's probably one of those anti-synergies like we talked about a minute ago that isn't a huge deal. I just don't know if I would go with the full 4 as personal preference.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that really quick, at least looking at it, is whenever I looked at blue-white and sort of how I was thinking about this deck, I was sort of thinking of the Seekers in the same way that I would think of like Gurmag Angler in the blue-black deck. Obviously, I think Seekers are a little bit more aggressive still.
Mm-hmm.
But it was sort of just like, if you land this and you think it's going to be good, like a Protect the Queen strategy is very, very reasonable. Obviously, they each have their own advantages. So Seeker like can swing your game in the life total. Gurmag Angler like can block for days. Right. But that's sort of just how I was thinking of Seeker in the counterspell situations, where it's like a lot of the times I'm holding up counterspell because I want to protect the Seeker and make sure that they can't play anything that can beat the Seeker.
Right. No, and that makes sense. I think that's just sort of the difference in our play styles, honestly. You know, if I had a Seeker on board and I was holding a Snap, a Ponder, a Preordain, and a Counterspell, and it was my turn, I would cast as many possible spells as I could and swing in big with the Seeker, as opposed to not cast anything and hold back on the counter, hold up Counterspell for the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, 6 of one, half dozen the other, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. Going into the games, there were some things that I was wrong about. There were some things I was right about. But there were also things that I didn't think about that I thought after playing a league with it. One, my brain really overstated the power of Fairy Godmother. So
you thought it was going to be way better than it actually was?
Yeah.
Or the opposite?
Yeah, let me give you, well, maybe even just why I thought it was powerful was wrong. So let me give you what my brain thought about it, and then you can tell me what your brain thought about it. So in my brain, the reason Fairy Godmother is good, right, is it is another 1-drop that turn 2, you can get your ninja down and buy back, and it's going to do something later. That was why I thought Fairy Godmother was good. More so, it also allows your ninja to get in for a second hit, even if they play a creature, to board, because it can gift the ninja flying. One of the things about that is that I don't think Fairy Godmother, I feel like it gives this sort of push-pull from the deck's mana base, to where I'm not sure it's worth having to play considerably more planes to be able to reliably play this on turn 1. Because, you're playing 4 Ponder, 4 Preordain, some number of Fairy Seers, depending on exactly what the list looked like. The initial one was playing 3. And whenever you do stuff like that, right, I have somewhere between 11 and 12 cards that are blue 1-drops, and then I have 3 white 1-drops. And the plan is to be able to play any of those cards on turn 1 and feel good about it. And I don't know if the strain put on the mana base is worth it. I still thought the card was powerful for all the synergies listed before, but it definitely wasn't powerful, in my opinion, as another turn 1 play that will do stuff later.
Right. I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. Anytime that I've brewed similar decks or seen Fairy Godmother, well, I'll start with the former. So specifically in a deck like this, with your Spell Stutter Sprites and your Fairy Seers and Miscreants or whatever you're running, the first thing I notice about Godmother is that it's kind of nice that it adds another fairy onto the board for your counter spells. I don't know how much of a difference that actually makes unless you're just playing a whole gaggle of them, but that's usually the first thing I see. And then the second is I always go back to the Seeker of the Way, because that's the queen I always want to protect. That 1 and a white for +2/+1 and flying. Sure, it gives flying, but that just doesn't feel like a great rate. 2 mana for +2/+1 seems a little sketchy. It doesn't feel great. Maybe I'm just used to casting, 1 mana huge enchantments in Heroic or whatever, but that's usually what I think on it. Other than that, it's fine. Like you, I'm not sure if a deck like this, like you mentioned, needs to stretch the mana base to splash for something like that. But if you're going to, I like the way you went with it with your Thraben Inspectors and that sort of thing to give you more optimal play turn 1 plays, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so just to kind of get into what you were saying, after my first...
Sorry, I think I kind of trailed off there a little bit.
Oh, yeah, no, you're totally fine. Is after playing the first league, something that I noticed, right, going on stretching the mana base, was, well, if my mana base is stretched like this, there were a few other things that I wanted, which was, 1, I wanted white 1-drops that did something that wasn't what Fairy Godmother did, even though I wasn't entirely out of love with the Fairy Godmother. And then I also thought about the mono blue tempo deck, which Sam was comparing this deck to, plays this card that I think is hyper powerful, that this deck could also take a lot of advantage of, and that's Of One Mind.
Yes.
So my second draft of the deck wanted Of One Mind and Thraben Inspector. So what I did is I cut the Fairy Godmothers for Thraben Inspector, and then I basically just found room trimming here and there to play the Of One Minds and played another league with it. And Thraben Inspector I thought was really powerful. Of One Mind with Thraben Inspector, Ninja, Palace Sentinel, Seeker, and then the sets of fairies I thought was very, very, very good.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. 1 mana,
you're never paying full retail for that.
Yep. I was still having some issues with the deck. Personally, I think this kind of goes back to, I thought the deck was a little bit too expensive. I guess going back to my first draft playthrough, I was really impressed with Journey to Nowhere. It answers a lot of the format, a lot of cards that this deck might have trouble with, it takes care of.
Sure.
Playing in this league with the Thraben Inspectors, I became less impressed with it because I felt like the deck really just wanted to buy itself time. And so while I didn't think the Journey to Nowheres were bad, like having these flyers and these creatures like ninjas that could get in, and Seeker of the Way, which you could grow if you needed to, I felt like more snaps would be beneficial. And so
more snaps are always a good thing.
Yeah, so sort of playing through this, and just let the record reflect, the decks that I was mainly running into were stuff like mono green aggro and affinity. I know mono green aggro isn't the most popular on the online metagame, but in this league I played against it twice. So yeah, so I played against it twice. I played against affinity twice, and the fifth deck was burn. So that might taint my view, but I felt like the journeys were good, but not as good as maybe some snaps, especially because if I felt like I was having issues with mono green aggro, then I would want something different out of the sideboard or maybe something cheaper to deal with their cards.
Sure.
As opposed to having to spend 2 mana to answer a 1 mana card.
I totally agree with you. The Of One Mind edition was probably a very good call. That can be 1 blue to draw 2 cards. That's pretty amazing. So I don't know. I like your changes here. I'm looking at your Goldfish list. Was this pretty much the one you ran most of the time?
Yeah, so this is the one that I settled on. I guess I haven't played this exact list yet because I made one change, which was just going through my now updated list after playing a few leagues with it, was I went back to the 1 Fairy Guidemother. I thought that card probably could be in place over the 3rd for the Thraben Inspector. I think this deck has a lot of selection, and so if you need that pump effect, that is something that you could look for to get your Seeker across the way, your Ninja across the way. Because we're having Thraben Inspector as white 1-drops, you no longer feel as bad for stretching your mana base because you do that anyways. That's why I decided to play that, and basically the variety with your cantrips and card draw made me want it over the 3rd Thraben Inspector. That could be a cute way to deck build, and if so, somebody yell at me in the comments. We love engagement on the podcast. Really helps us.
Yes, absolutely. Especially something like this. I would love for not that I hate the deck, but I would love for like a non-familiars deck that's blue-white to do really well. And I think something like this is sort of the right shell, if that makes sense. I think this is definitely on the right track. I've just never had any luck with it. It feels like a tempo deck that its meter is set kind of slow.
Yeah.
You know, it's running at about 75 beats a minute where it should be up around 120.
Yeah, so I sort of attempted to change that by making, some of the changes. So after the white 1-drops, I went up to the full 4 Fairy Seer. I wanted to up the fairy count in the deck for the Of One Mind synergies, and I think Fairy Seer is just an absolutely absurd card.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, especially with, you'll see in the list, I'm playing a few 1 and 2 ofs, and my sideboard has a lot more 1 ofs, so I want more selection out of the deck.
Right.
And then with the 1 Fairy Guidemother, 4 Fairy Seer, of course, we're playing 4 Spellstutter Sprite, and 4 Ninja. And then to round it off, we have our super good card. I was playing 4 of this, actually went back down to 3, just because I found that this wasn't actually the way that I was winning the game a lot of the times. And so I went back to 3 Seeker of the Way instead of the full 4. Now, Seeker might be the card that gets across to win the game, but really any of Seeker of the Way, Ninja, or any of the threats out of the sideboard coming across are how you win the game, because your spells holding your tempo advantage is really how you win the game. So this final list admittedly moved away from the all-in on Seeker strategy, I guess.
Sure. No, I think whether yours is right or the original one's right, I think it's definitely some combination of the two, or maybe somewhere in between. I'm with you, though. I don't know if Seeker of the Way needs to be the queen or needs to be the spotlight of a deck like this, because we don't... In blue-white, we don't have the rally the peasants, flashback rally the peasants, swing for 25, turn. We don't have that sort of thing. And that's really where Seeker of the Way shines. It is a deck like Boros, is a deck like, even to a certain extent, if you build a black-white Pestilence deck, around it. It can do a lot of damage. It can be your win condition. I just don't necessarily think that in a deck like this, it's going to be something you should rely on, but it's going to be something that will save you every now and then.
And then that actually ended my final list creature suite in the main deck. I cut the Palace Sentinels entirely, and the reason why is because I went down to 20 lands. Mm-hmm. So the Palace Sentinels, to me, were like, I understand where you're coming from because you see the blue-black fairies deck and the blue-red fairies decks making the game about the Monarch and kind of transferring into like this controlling deck that will eventually just draw so many cards it's going to find a way to beat you. And while I think that that's powerful, one of the things that white doesn't really have in comparison to these other colors, I think, is this cheap long-term removal. So black casts Snuff Out and then a few 2-mana removal spells, right? Red has Bolt and Scred, and then maybe one more 2-mana removal spell, maybe 2 more on a Braid, right?
Yep.
Versus we have nothing really on par. The best card I could come up with is Sunlance, and then Journey to Nowhere being your 2-mana removal spell. And I opted to mostly stick with the snaps. So again, sticking us more in that tempo direction like the mono blue deck, which doesn't usually play the Monarch cards, with the exception of Boros Monarch and Blue-Black being the 2 best decks predicted on a weekend, in which case I might actually main deck the Monarch cards again, just to have a good way to steal it through their removal.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a meta call, but I think going in blind or running this for the first time, you don't need those main deck. I agree with you totally. I'm glad you brought up the removal, or I guess lack of removal in a deck like this, because I was going to mention that earlier. I think Azorius or blue-white, whatever you want to call it, is hard in Pauper because we don't have... White does not, especially in Pauper, white does not have super removal. It doesn't have superb protection outside of maybe Prismatic Strands, if you're running that route. But yeah, we don't have the Snuff Outs and the Cast Downs and the Galvanic Blasts and Flame Slashes and Screds and all that stuff. We just don't. It's a huge issue with blue-white, and that's something that I've always had trouble with when I play a strictly blue-white deck, and I think that's how I end up going more aggro, because I'm like, well, damn, every game I'm losing by turn 6, turn 7. I need to be faster. So I end up with 4 Mutagenic Growths and 4 Snaps and 4 Seeker of the Way, and I'm just trying to machine gun them down by turn 4, and I just never have any luck with it, I guess.
I know I touched the 20 lands. I kept that 4 Ash Barrens, 7 Islands, 5 Plains, 4 Tranquil Cove. The Islands Plains split, you could probably convince me to change. Mana bases are almost something that like I just roll my eyes at a lot of the times. Outside of the like specialty lands like Ash Barrens. Right. I know that sounds ridiculous, especially because we're a podcast about getting better. That's a bad habit that one day I'll kick.
Yeah, it happens though. I mean, it's very easy to do, especially when you're playing a deck for the first time or the first few times. Like, this looks about right. Let me grab a handful of these and a handful of those and a way to tutor them up, and I'll be good.
The spell suite, though, I am
a fan of this. This is a very good looking spell suite.
Yeah. So starting with the removal / interaction bit of the spell suite. So I went up to the full 4 snap. Like I said, really wanting to stress test the theory of getting to play, like having the option to play as many spells as possible on each turn cycle is a lot better. Because we're going on that more tempo strategy, snap seemed like the best option to me.
Now, can I ask you, before you move on to the next spell, because of snap, and I haven't had a chance to try this yet, but because of the full 4 snap, are you interested at all in running the Chanceries, the bounce land?
Potentially. There's a lot of strength there in that, snap is going to help. One of the things that leaned me against it when building this mana base, though, is that if I snap and untap Chancery and Island, there's nothing for 3 mana to do. And a lot of times what I'm holding up on my opponent's turn is blue for Counterspell. So I couldn't even tap the Island for another 1-drop and then hold up Counterspell. If that makes any sense with the Chancery.
Nope.
So
absolutely. That's a definitely a deeper level tech than I would have thought about it. I'm just like, yeah, 3 more mana, let's go.
Yeah, but like, here's the thing too, though, right? Like, somebody else is probably gonna hear this and do that, and it's gonna be busted, because what it does allow you to do, right, is you can snap their creature, attack with your 1-drop and Seeker, hit for 3 with your Seeker, use your Chancery to put a Ninja into play, so then you're hitting for 5, and then you can immediately replay that 1-drop, right?
Yeah.
So that line of play might be powerful enough that you might do it, but also just adding more tapped lands, more inconsistency to your mana base is not necessarily something that I'm looking to do until I find out that this deck is actually powerful.
I think for sure.
I think this list is trending towards getting more and more powerful, and I think that there's something here. But before I figure out the exact minutia of the mana base, I want to make sure that there's actually something there, and I don't want something like inconsistency in mana base to turn me off from trying to tune the deck.
I gotcha. Yep, I'm not normally a fan of the bounce lands. Obviously, they are important in the decks that they are important in. So it was just something I thought of, especially in blue-white. They're even a little more brutal if you don't have a way to go infinite with snaps and, mull drifters and all this crazy stuff. So it was just something I thought of. We can move on to the next.
Yeah, so that's sort of like the force snap is sort of there. Then my other one piece of removal is I'm playing 1 Sunlance in the main deck. Basically, Sunlance sorcery deals 3 damage to target non-white creature. Basically, again, I just want as much cheap removal as possible. I could see eventually even playing more Sunlance, because a lot of these fairies do play more removal. But I'm not sure how good Sunlance is. So this is one of the changes that I made before playing this deck, which is I just want to test out Sunlance in the main deck to see whether or not I like it. You could also play Last Breath in this slot. You could play Vapor Snag.
That was one on the tip of my tongue, the Vapor Snag. I love that one.
Yeah. Yep. So there's a few cards that you could play all around, but Sunlance is just the one that I'm going with right now. So that's for the removal. Then stuck with the full 4 counterspells. Counterspell is a card that I think is very powerful. And, the snap synergies that I've been describing, I think are really good, because you can snap a creature and then again counter it if they need to play it, etc.
That's huge.
And then something that sort of falls in the middle of aggro/protection is Mutagenic Growth. I really like it because it's 0 mana, save Seeker of the Way. It saves it from Bolt, some Screds, and I'm pretty sure it saves it. Yeah, it does save it from Galvanic Blast. So Mutagenic Growth is very good with your Seeker. And then obviously, it pumps all of your other creatures pretty well as well. If you have a Seeker, you're also hitting them with a 5/5 if you need to.
Yeah.
Gaining 5
life back. Yep.
So I think Mutagenic Growth is good. I really like that Sam was playing it in his original list. To be honest with you, I really want 4 of these. I just couldn't find the room in the deck. Eventually, as the list becomes more and more refined and I figure things out, I think having more of these is better as opposed to, only playing the 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I definitely wanted them. 2 seems fine, especially with all the, again, card draw, card selection. Because in the spell suite, we are still playing 4 Ponder, 4 Preordain, and 3 of One Mind. And then obviously we also have the Fairy Seers for the additional scry.
I like that. I am not opposed to more mutagenic growths. Like you said, I don't know where you'd squeeze them in. Maybe I don't know. This is a pretty tight list as it is. Maybe kick out the Sunlance and add another mutagenic, but then you're kind of losing removal. So
yeah, I could see going down enough One Mind to play an extra piece of removal, or cutting a Ponder or Preordain to play extra removal or an extra mutagenic, or cut a Fairy Seer to play an extra mutagenic. There's so many single card decisions that could be made in a list like this, and I try really hard not to focus on stuff like that. PV actually said in a YouTube video that I watched a long time ago, basically, if you have 2 choices and you can't decide after thinking about it for some time, it's probably because they're both really good, or both good choices. And so figuring out which one's going to make you 51% and which one's going to make you 52% to win the game or whatever. If it's a 51-49 difference, basically, right? You're never going to be able to tell that difference because you can't possibly run through that many simulations. So a lot of times it's just do whatever feels right. And that's something that I hate about Magic, but it's correct. And so this is what feels right to me right now. And after I play a league, some other set of numbers is going to feel right, and I'll never know which one is better.
Yeah, quote unquote, feel is so subjective, but I love it. And that's honestly how I build a lot of decks. It's how I work on a lot of decks. What would you think about... I know in the pre-show we talked about I was brewing a deck like this about 1.5 years ago, almost card for card, literally from what we got sent in the email, except the version I had was running some equipments like Bone Splitters, Mantle of Tides, that sort of thing. Is equipment just too slow in the metagame, or where do you stand on that card type?
So equipment is good because it's a repeatable pump effect. So I can see why equipment would be good. Oftentimes equipment is good for the same reason that Rancor is good, right? Like just repeatable pump in some way. The reason that I don't like cards like Bone Splitter and stuff like that right now is because I find that a lot of the games that I play are not necessarily about having like an extra Rancor or Bone Splitter equip or whatever. But it is definitely something that I could see playing in the deck.
I just wasn't sure about it. They seem fun, especially now that we've had a few more sets and we've had more auto-equip, when this enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control sort of equipment. And those are always fun, but I just worry that they're more fun than they are good. Something
to be said about playing Bone Splitter right is it would probably be good to suit up your Thraben Inspector with a Bone Splitter, make it a 3-2, actually get in for attacking. Because really, like, the reason that I'm playing Thraben Inspector here is just a nod to liking to spend mana, having multiple ways to spend mana. And so, getting to play that 2 mana draw card, if you play it on turn 1, you're going to get to ninja it back and play it again. But, finding a way to make Bone Splitter or Thraben Inspector actually get to attack during, like, these complicated board states with a Bone Splitter attached might actually be good. So it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I like it. It may be worth trying down the line, but I don't think it's like a groundbreaking change or anything to the deck. Now, there is one possible addition that I'm probably going to try out just because it's way out in left field, and I love it. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite cards to play with, to brew with, either one. It's Deputy of Acquittals. I'm wondering how that could fit in a deck like this. Deputy of Acquittals is a human wizard, so it fits of one mind or whatever. It costs a blue and a white, so it's a little hard on the mana base to get it reliably. But it is a 2/2 with it's a 2/2 human wizard with flash. And whenever Deputy of Acquittals enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. It's a little janky. There's definitely reasons that it never sees play. Because it reads a lot better than it actually is.
Yeah, so my thoughts here, right, are the mana is hard on the blue and the white. But you're also probably not always looking to play this on turn 2, right? Like, you're probably looking to play this, like, turn 3 or 4, you're holding up Counterspell. You're wanting to buy back a Spellstar Sprite you've already used, or, worst case scenario, Thraben Inspector, Fairy Seer.
100%. Yep.
So that's not too much of a concern. It can save your creatures, which is a really good tempo play. If they point Lightning Bolt at Seeker of the Way, instead of having to spend resources to either pump your Seeker of the Way or a Counterspell, you can put Seeker of the Way back into your hand and still have a 2/2 in play.
Right.
So I could see it being fine. I'm just hesitant to wonder if this doesn't do things that the deck already does with ninja buybacks and the fact that you can snap your own creatures if you need to, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I never think about, not that I didn't think it did it, but I never think about snapping my own creatures. It's always like I need to get in and move your guy out of the way sort of thing. But yeah, that is a good point. You've already got the 4 ninjas, 4 snaps. That's 8 of those effects right there. So, but yeah, it's just always a card that I've been trying to jam in wherever I possibly can, and it never is good, but it's got to be good somewhere. Wizards would never make a bad card, so it has to be good somewhere.
Yeah, up on the screen currently at this point, you should see the current list that I've been playing, or that I plan on playing, with that one Sunlance change. There is the sideboard that I think I would play right now, although I'm not really sure about the sideboard for this deck that I could get into. But first, did you have any other thoughts about what might be playable in the main deck, or what you think you would have success with?
No, I think it's either already in your version or we've talked about it. I may, just because I played so much with Brute Squad that was running 3 and or 4 of 1 mines, I may try to cut that down to 2, just because sometimes it felt bad. But that could be, that maybe just a difference of a few percentage points here or there. But no, like Vapor Snag is really good. I don't know if you necessarily need it here. But yeah, you've kind of got the sideboard covered as well with your curfews and your gut shots and dispels and all that good stuff. Gut shot and mutagenic growth are awesome together with Seeker of the Way, because you're basically they're free spells. You're getting all that life back and more. So no, I think it looks pretty good. There might be a card or 2 that I tweak when I run it out there, but no, I think we got it covered.
Yeah, so just to touch on the sideboard, I'm playing 1 curfew. Each player chooses a creature he or she controls and returns it to its owner's hand. This saw some play in the mono blue fairies deck. Whenever I played it, this felt powerful, especially against decks like Heroic, Boggles, and stuff like that.
Oof, yeah. Because it doesn't target.
Yeah, now of course if they have their like multi-creature draws, right, like they get to choose and it's not as good then, but
right.
Kind of take your percentage points where you can get them. It allows you to like leave your snaps in for like their tokens or whatever, because a lot of times in those matchups they'll like start suiting up their tokens that like they make with like Colony Garden or whatever, and the reason that they do that is to spread out the damage. So if you can like snap one of those and then curfew back the actual Boggle, like you're just getting so much there. Then 2 Dispel. Dispel's sort of like a staple of these decks sideboards. 1 mana Counterspell is exactly where you want to be. You touched on the 3 Gut Shot. Free spell, really good against like elves, other fairies decks, stuff like that. Love Gut Shot. Yep. Hydroblast, I think is powerful. I'm only playing 2 of them right now. I could see anywhere from 1 to 4 being correct in your sideboard at any given moment of time.
Sure.
I'm playing 2 just because I wanted to play these other cards that I'm about to mention.
Right.
The 1 Journey to Nowhere in the sideboard, that actually goes alongside the 1 Oblivion Ring. I like both of those cards. I don't know which one I necessarily think is better. Usually I think Journey to Nowhere is better until the time that I need the Oblivion Ring.
Right.
And I haven't
That's
actually...
exactly right.
Yeah, I haven't tested Oblivion Ring in this deck. But instead of doing it in the main deck, I decided to do it in the sideboard and basically bring those in both of the same matchups. Then obviously you can also bring in Oblivion Ring at times that you might not bring in Journey to Nowhere. Then I have 1 Azure Fleet Admirable. It's the Soul Monarch creature I'm playing, 3/3 for 4. You become the Monarch, and it can't be blocked by creatures the Monarch controls. Basically, any deck that introduces the Monarch, I would bring this in against, because they should be lower on life total than you at the point that fighting over the Monarch matters. This gets you control of the Monarch, and if they somehow take it back, like you're still golden to go in and steal it, as well as get their life total down. Pumping this whenever it is unblockable with Fairy Guide Mother, felt really powerful, especially because, a lot of times, right, like the decks that steal the Monarch from you with a creature are playing flyers, either, Boros Monarch or blue-black fairies. So the fact that, Fairy Guide Mother, like the spell part of that doesn't get much mileage in those matchups because they can still jump block something with flying.
Yep.
But giving the pump to Azure Fleet Admirable, which is just straight up unblockable, is nice. I like this one a fair bit over the Palace Sentinels for that reason. However, it does die to Lightning Bolt, so keep that in mind. If you play it, you're going to want to protect it with Counterspell, Spellstutter, Sprite, Mutagenic Growth, etc.
6 total white creatures is probably not enough to have, say, a Prismatic Strands in your sideboard, I would presume. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Maybe if you played like more Fairy Godmothers and more Craven Inspectors, and kind of make this more of like a white focused deck, you potentially could.
Did you ever want to have a more, I don't really know, but Apostle's Blessing? Do you see a room for that in here, or is that more for the Protect the Queen strategy?
Yeah, no, I think the Protect the Queen strategies are like where you want Apostle's Blessing to be. I didn't particularly like it just because we already have so much protection built into the deck. Again, Counterspell, Snap, Mutagenic Growth, Spellstutter Sprite goes a long way in doing what Apostle's Blessing could already be doing. Now,
Sure.
of course, Apostle's Blessing also in some board states grants unblockable, just by nature of, if they have only green creatures and you give your thing pro-green, you're getting in. I don't know exactly how much that matters. I think in more like play to the board oriented metagames, that is definitely a thing to be considering, I guess. And then just real quick, the only other card that I'm playing my current sideboard, I'm playing the full 4 Dust to Dust. I think this card's pretty absurd. As long as people are main decking Dust to Dust, I will play 4 in my sideboard.
Yeah, that is one thing that has changed quite dramatically lately. For a while, Dust to Dust was a staple playset in the sideboard, and now it's just showing up in main boards everywhere, and I don't know how I feel about that. It's weird.
I agree that it's weird, but I also don't think it makes the metagame nearly as bad as what anyone else is saying. In my experience in playing the leagues, I play against a high variety of decks. We've had a few different decks make top 8. We had the blue-white Evoke Brew recently make top 8 of a challenge. So yeah, I think
there's been some really cool decks showing up in the challenges and leagues lately.
Yeah, I think that this metagame is relatively healthy. It's just that the flavor of basing your brew around right now is the wildfire land strategy. And I think that that's what puts Dust to Dust over the top versus other affinity hate, is the fact that it also just exiles your opponent's lands in a lot of matchups.
Yeah, it's just brutal.
Which, by the way, that card is 3 mana, so it might look weird in this deck's sideboard. I do still bring it in against those tap land decks a lot of times. Maybe not the full 4, even though, I try to, though. Especially on the play. And the reason why is because it is just such a tempo play if you get to exile their lands, that it's, a lot better than just some of the other stuff you could be doing, like Sunlance. Sunlance comes to mind. The Mutagenic Growths come to mind, depending on what exactly Cleansing Wildfire deck they're playing.
Right.
But a lot of times, I bring it in because it's better than those other cards, and it's really good in certain situations.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get 3 or 4 in from the sideboard and hit the first one on turn 3, you've almost got the game in the bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that powerful against the right deck.
But that's my thoughts on the deck. I want to say a big thank you to our listener, Sam, for sending this in, as well as being patient, as we corresponded through email. Super great. Hopefully now friend of the show, just from emailing back and forth. I'm glad that we got to talk about this. Overall, playing this deck, I had tons of fun, which I don't always have fun playing brews, because I want to play something that I know is good rather than trying to figure out whether or not it's good. It's not even necessarily about the winning. It's just I want to know that my losses are me. And it is a rough mental path to be a brewer. You're like, just do I suck? Does the deck suck? And it's usually, I suck. The deck's 100% awesome, and anybody else playing it could win this league. I just suck. But no, it turns out that 5-color nothing is terrible. Esper Party is terrible. It just turns out that that's the facts. Well, we can do what we always do and blame Wizards of the Coast.
That's right. That's right.
But anyways, if you don't have anything else and I don't have anything else, this episode's technically been one big Q&A, so I don't think we actually have any questions this week.
Nope. I thought about asking, and then I thought, well, yeah, like you just said, this whole episode is one giant question, so we'll just stick it with that.
All right. And that's going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JustGuyDad. Brad, where can they find you?
At Pauper_B on Twitter, or BradDrakV on MTGO.
Yeah, and you can find us both at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything else, email us or leave a comment down below. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism Network, for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other.
And never stop bouncing ninjas.